Okay, good afternoon everyone. For those who don't know me, my name is David Scott and I'm a research fellow with the University of Melbourne. Today I'm very happy to introduce to you Associate Professor Corneel Vandelanotte, which I'm sure is sort of close to your name.
Yeah, it's pretty good.
I have actually worked with Corneel for 2 years previously, but I'm going to just read off a bit of information about him just so I don't miss anything. So he's the Director of the Centre for Physical Activity Studies at Central Queensland University in Rockhampton. Corneel's research focuses on health behaviour changes through website-delivered and computer-tailored physical activity interventions. And to that end, today he's going to talk to us about the development and evaluation of a web-based intervention to improve physical activity using personally tailored videos. Thanks, Corneel.
Thanks, David. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm very happy to be here. Very nice these people to invite me. Today I'm going to go through a couple of different smaller studies that has eventually led to an HMSC funded project grant, which is currently ongoing. And so what you will see is a couple of different studies that led up to what we at the moment developing and soon going to start evaluating. So the first study is into the qualitative and quantitative development of a video-tailored physical activity intervention. And so, don't know how well most of you are familiar with physical activity research. So the logical question might be, why do we need another physical activity intervention? And the main reasons for that are that physical activity prevalence is still pretty low. Though lots of different interventions have been developed and tested, most of them struggle with long-term effectiveness and also they struggle reaching a lot of people at an acceptable cost. So we need to continue to explore this space and come up with better interventions to help people to become more active over the longer term and to prevent all sorts of chronic disease. So we need innovative approaches to increase activity, website or interventions that can have a wide reach at an acceptable cost. We know that in Australia, internet access is really high, and more and more the internet users are representative of the overall population. A couple of years ago, people might have argued, but you won't reach as many women or you won't reach as many people with a low socioeconomic background, but that argument is becoming really difficult. In fact, you can reach populations through the internet that you almost can't reach in real life because you've got this pooled power altogether. Web-based physical activity interventions have demonstrated short-term behavior change, but one of the things that keeps coming back and back in research is that there's problems with engagement and retention of participants, which basically translates as people A, are not coming to my website, and B, if they're there, they're not staying very long or they're never coming back. We know that for interventions, or for web-based interventions to be effective, we need to have sufficient exposure. So the more times people come back to your website and the more time they actually spend on your website, the more likely it is that they will actually change their behavior. And there's quite a bit of evidence to demonstrate that. Then there's a separate stream of research, are computer-tailored interventions, which they've been around for quite a while. They didn't really, the first computer-tailored interventions didn't start on the internet. They were more paper and pen-based. And what they do is they provide tailored or individually adapted feedback to people about their health behavior. And in the case of my research, it's about physical activity, but it could be any other health behavior. And so you use a computerized expert system to generate that personalized feedback. So basically, the way it works is people are given a short survey, a bunch of questions about being active or not. Then there's a whole bunch of algorithms that will decide based on the answers that people give to the survey, what the feedback is that we will give to them. And so the first generation or the computer-tailored interventions were paper-based. So there was a paper-based survey that was sent out by a research team. The answers were sent back, and then they would put all the answers in a computer, and the computer program would spit out the right feedback, and then they would send it back to the person. So kind of a long-winded process, but still better than nothing, still better than a letter that's the same for everybody in the population to say you should become more active, which would have a lot of irrelevant information in there. So the idea of computer tailoring is to make it personally relevant, as if the letter was written personally for that person, but it's still a computer that does it, because if you want to reach huge populations, you couldn't do it all one by one. And the second generation was computer delivered, perhaps still not over the internet, but people just sit behind a computer and fill out a survey and get it instantly, their feedback. Now, there has been a couple of these interventions have been developed and evaluated over the internet, so website delivered, and they have shown some success. Though something important to note is that the more controlled the situation, the better the effect was. So I did a study where we actually had people come into a computer class, they got their feedback, it was printed out, and they could take it home with them. The exact same intervention was a lot less effective when we just did it on the internet and people didn't have to come into our lab to do it. So not only have not that many of those interventions been evaluated, if they do deliver personalized feedback over the internet, then it's virtually always text-based. So basically words on a web page that tell them, "Dear Corneel, you should become more active because of reasons A, B, and C." Now, the way people deal with text on a web page is different than how you deal with text in a book, and we know that people aren't so concentrated when they're browsing the internet, and they tend to read information in this F-shaped pattern. So they skim and scan, they read the first line of the page, and then maybe half of the second, and then they start scrolling down. So to transmit information in a text-based format doesn't work as well on the internet. And then the internet itself keeps changing as well, and the way a lot of information, how it's being brought to people these days, is very visual. It's images, it's videos, it's graphics. It's not very text dense anymore. So you could argue in a way that a text-based computer-tailored intervention on the internet is kind of outdated. Might still be effective, but it might be that if you deliver it in a different way, it'd be more effective. And so that's where our video tailoring story kind of comes in. So we know there's a wide reach, but people don't really read all that much text. Broadband connections are dominating the market, which kind of indicates that, well, people are actually capable of watching videos. They're not there with the dial-up anymore. And the technique, computer tailoring, has demonstrated effectiveness. So how can we use the one to make the other work better? And so our idea was to replace the text bits by video bits. So the aim of the first small study that we did was to test the potential usability and feasibility of developing an internet-based video-tailored physical activity intervention. So we actually combined two studies into one. We did a bunch of focus groups where we asked people about the whole concept, the idea of receiving personalized feedback over the internet and using videos. And we've then followed that up with a larger survey in Queensland, where we had only 10 questions in that survey to kind of touch the surface on what people thought about this. And of course, we tried to introduce those questions as well as we could just to see whether what came out of the focus group was actually backed up by larger numbers of people. So first important thing that came out of it is that people kind of like the concept of personalized video messages. That's a good start, I suppose. They did say at the same time they didn't want the videos to be longer than 5 minutes. Longer than that, they're onto something else. They're bored. It needs to move, and it needs to move quick. And that's a challenge if you want to bring, dense, relevant information to people. You mightn't be able to cram it all in 5 minutes. But linked to that, they said, rather than getting one massive video that takes you half an hour to get through, they would rather have you chop it up in smaller pieces and drip feed it to them over time. So one 5-minute video per week would be a lot better than one 20-minute video once. That's at least what they told us in the focus group. When you present the information through videos, there's a whole range of new variables that becomes available that you can also tailor the information on. And one of those is who should actually be in the video presenting the information. It could be an infographic, it could be a person, it could be a cartoon. There's so many options you all of a sudden can play with, which is a good thing and then a bad thing at the same time, because it makes it a lot more challenging to actually develop an intervention like that. But what came out of the focus group was that people didn't really care. The opinions were very, very distributed. Some people wanted someone like them. Other people wanted a coach, you know, with the joggers on, or someone else wanted to have someone that looked like a GP or something like that. Just as long as they were convincing and had credibility, that was the main thing. People like the idea a lot of getting really personalized feedback, but at the same time, they don't like the idea of having to fill out a lengthy questionnaire to answer all the questions. So that's tough. And at least at the time, and this area is moving very quickly, people didn't really like the idea of receiving the tailored videos on their mobile phones. This was done 2 or 3 years ago, so that probably has already shifted quite a bit by now, because smartphones they were already there, but not to the same extent as they are there today. Also, something that popped up was they want the videos to look good. They don't want your handy cam shots. They want something that looks professional. And I think people are really spoiled when it comes to the internet. There's a lot of really high produced websites out there. A lot of money is being put in by big companies, and things look really, really nice, and they work really, really well. So the user expectation is actually pretty high, and you kind of have to match that standard. The approach within the video, when you put text on a page, you can maybe bold or underline or some words, but when you have an actual person presenting it, there will have to be some sort of an approach to it. And it couldn't be too pushy or too preachy. It can't be too confronting or too hard. One of the things that we showed them in the focus groups was, I think the biggest loser at the time had a website on which there was their coach, which is some kind of military type guy. It was only 2 or 3 questions, but then it would tell them something, and then he would be telling them in a very direct way that it's not good enough. And they didn't like that at all. That didn't go down very, no. So it should be positive, friendly, encouraging, motivating, inspiring, all the soft words. So that's what people like. They supported the idea of simple graphs to illustrate a point. So maybe to show where their BMI is, or whether they're active enough, in a very simple graph type thing. They thought that was good. They would have liked their videos to be stored on the website so they could come back at it anytime without having to answer all the questions again. And most of the participants then indicated that their internet connection would be able to handle videos, but that if the program was slow for whatever reason, there would be no mercy. They'd be out there in no time. So we then followed that up with the survey that we had about over 1,000 people in it. So when we asked what internet delivery method would you prefer, only just over a third said video. I think trying to explain why this is low is because we're trying to introduce a foreign concept to them on a questionnaire, and them not having experienced what it really is. They probably said, I'll just do text. Though, again, that might have already changed again by now. And it was quite telling that the younger people are a lot more keen to see video than to see text. We also asked those that did choose for video, why? And the main reason that came out is that I would find it easier to understand it than reading. That was, but it didn't stick out really all that much compared to a bunch of other reasons. Again, the length of the videos, there's even 13% of the sample that said it shouldn't be longer than 1 minute. Very challenging to actually bring something across in that time, but it's overwhelming. More than half of the sample says it needs to be less than 5 minutes, or they're not happy. The vast majority of our sample indicated that the internet connection would be fine dealing with videos. Again, who would you prefer to be in the videos? It didn't really stick out. The one that was more than the others, but still not all that much more, was someone like themselves. Though at the same time, something that came out of the focus groups, if they themselves were overweight or obese, then they didn't think that was a good idea. That wouldn't set a right role model. And then the approach within the videos, the one that really stuck out was it should be convincing and motivating. Things like humor are good, but they might bounce back. Humor doesn't work with everyone in the same way that you try to, or you might stand up looking really lame. So even though we'd like to make it work, and it might work really well if you get it right, it's kind of a high-risk strategy almost. But convincing and motivating is what people preferred. And then again, the mobile phone, they didn't really like the idea of seeing videos on the small screen. Might have changed. Also, in the meanwhile, a lot of different formats have come out, iPad minis and smartphones that are a bit larger than your normal smartphones. So that kind of stuff might have shifted a bit. So from this, we gathered a lot of valuable information to go to the next stage of the study. There was a lot of support for the feasibility in terms of people are ready for the type of intervention, and the internet infrastructure is able to cope with the demands. But also a number of challenges are identified. The videos need to be short, they need to look good, which makes it harder. And yeah, as I said, mobile phones, not there yet. So next step was to develop and evaluate this type of intervention, and I'm pretty sure this video won't work, but I've got it open somewhere. Oops. There's my cursor. Oh, there's my cursor. So, just you guys don't see that. All right, the video's already going. So this is the platform that we developed for a pilot study. So people basically go to a website, they fill in a questionnaire, answer questions about themselves and their activity level. I've skipped through this a bit, so should speed up a bit in a minute. So these are questions about how active are you, and just to assess whether they meet physical activity recommendations, yes or no. And then after completing all the questions, they go to a video page.
Our calculations show that on average you're doing between 15 and 20 minutes of moderate or vigorous physical activity per day. To enjoy health benefits, physical activity scientists worldwide agree that you should do a minimum of 30 minutes of moderate intensity physical activity every day. Although 30 minutes a day is the minimum recommendation, you will gain more health benefits and fitness if you're active for longer and at higher intensities. This graph indicates where you are in relation to the minimal and optimal physical activity recommendations. As you can see, unfortunately, you are not doing enough physical activity to achieve health benefits from being active. Based on your height and body weight, calculations indicate that your BMI, or body mass index, is over 30. That means you're obese and at serious risk of developing cardiovascular disease, diabetes, and other health problems. Losing weight is recommended to move back into the healthy weight range. As your physical activity levels are really low, I'd like you to give more attention to the benefits of being active again, which are not only related to health and the prevention of chronic disease.
You have reached the end of your first personalized physical activity video. In this video, we have presented you with some facts about your physical activity. The second video is all about how we can help you how to become more active. And since you're not very active, we really recommend that you have a look at this video too.
So the program was designed to be able to do text and video. So what I'm showing here is actually the text version of what people got. So we actually had three groups: those that only got the video, those that only got the text, and a group that got the combination, which is what you're looking at right now. So that's the home page. You missed it just before, I think, when I was fiddling. It's the same process, a couple more questions. So I think by now you've got the idea of how it worked. So then we had developed something we would start using in some studies. And so the first study we did was we did an eye tracking study to compare how do people that received the video version responded compared to those that got the text. So we didn't use the combined version in this study, just text versus video to keep it simple. So the idea was to investigate differences in attention and recall to the physical activity message across the two conditions and using eye tracking to do that. So we had a pretty small group for that. They were all staff and students from CQ University, and we randomly allocated them to either condition. In fact, the research assistant that helped us with this didn't know what was going to happen because I had pre-organized all the profiles within the program. And she would introduce someone to the study, and it would start, and she wouldn't even know what condition they were randomized to. So people were introduced to the eye tracker. It was calibrated, so it would track their eyes. There was a short questionnaire for demographics and physical activity questions, and then they received the feedback either video or text-based. And then immediately after that, there was already a couple of questions about recall of the message, which we audio taped. And the whole process took about 20 to 25 minutes per participant. And so attention was measured by the time people spent looking within one of these red frames. So you see one is the video version, the other is the text version. And so, when people looked into that frame, then we know that we're kind of paying attention. So here, I think this video, if I can, should work. This is an example of eye tracking video. This is actually one of our participants, and they're paying attention because you can see they're actually reading text and they're looking at the graph. So and this is obviously the text version, and then this is how it looks in the video version. So participants in the video group spend a lot longer interacting with the program than those in the text group. But they spend a bit less time actually looking within the area that we defined. But the difference in time that they spend watching at the screen and watching the physical activity advice within the square was significantly higher than those in the text group. But the proportion that they looked outside the frame, that wasn't significantly different between the groups. And also, I mean, we had small groups. Nevertheless, we had to look at, do the demographics make any difference? For the most part, we didn't see anything except for gender. We saw that in both groups, text and video, women interacted with the program for a longer time. I think that was significant for all women, but not different between the two groups of text and video. And then we asked them these recall questions immediately after the program. You see people score really well on some questions, and then only half and half for other questions. What was presented in the graph, second last question, only 49% of people got it right. So that's a bit of mixed results there. So when we compared that text versus video, we didn't see any significant differences, probably because we're not actually having enough power to do that kind of comparison. We did see that people in the video group recalled better what was in the graph compared to the text group, though not significantly. But the opposite was in terms of what chronic disease can you prevent by being active? People in the text group answered it a lot better than people in the video group. The overall mean total recall score was nearly identical in both groups. So that was a bit of a surprise, despite that the video group spent a lot longer interacting with the program. So from this, we concluded that attention was higher in the video group. But video and text participants spent the majority of their time looking at the feedback rather than other areas in the screen. Women had a lot higher levels of attention than men. That was a bit less obvious in the video group. No significant recall differences. This might be due to the insensitivity of the measure, because it was immediately after looking at the website, and then we don't really know what knowledge people already had before they did the test. So there's probably ways that we can explain why the results didn't really come out all that well. And then the final point there is that we need to work on communicating better, because some things obviously came across pretty well, but other things didn't really come across from the questions that people answered. And this where's the mouse? This is just an example of when people are not paying attention. So that this is a skimming and scamming behavior. People just flick through it. They go quicker than they can really read. This person seems to be reading the cartoons a lot more than the actual text, which was not the desired effect of having a cartoon there. So we'll remove those for the next version. I think there should be a video example as well, where you see they'll be looking at the menu on one side of the screen a lot, just because they're bored probably, and I just want to move on. So they spend a lot less time actually. One of the limitations of this study is that with the video you also have audio, which we weren't able to track with the eye tracker. We only looked at their eye movements. So yeah, even though they might be really focusing on what's in the video, they might still be listening. And there was no way we could test that, at least not with the equipment that we had. So yeah, the study had some power issues probably. Some participants had to be removed due to problems with the eye tracking. Yeah, obviously from this study, we don't know whether there was any effect on behavior. And that's where the next little study went into, is we did a randomized controlled trial. Oh, no, sorry, a randomized trial, I should say, because it had a text group, a video group, and a combined group. It didn't have a control group. So the aim was to examine the initial effectiveness and acceptability of the intervention we kind of have developed. The way we did this, we have access to a pretty large database of people that in the past have completed surveys with us and said they're willing to be involved in other research. The whole study was run online. There was no face-to-face contact. There was no phone contact. There was only emails, and here's a link to a website, and go and check it out. So we did a baseline measure, 1 week measure, and 1 month measure. Only people that answered no to all physical activity readiness questionnaire questions were allowed into the study, so that people that shouldn't become more active because of medical reason were not in the study. And so the program automatically randomized people into one of 3 conditions, and our outcome measures were demographics, the physical activity. For physical activity, we used the Active Australia questionnaire, and we also developed our own physical activity advice acceptability questionnaire, basically examining how well did they believe the feedback was true and relevant and credible and all of those things. And then we had some upsets as well. And then we used repeated measures and COVAS to analyze the outcomes. So of those 3,000 odd people, 860 completed the baseline, but we had to exclude about 450 people because of this PAR-Q questionnaire, which we didn't like. And you see massive dropout straight up, which is probably due to the fact that there was no real interaction with participants other than emails. But this was for us, this was a part study, proof of concept. So with 288 completed measures at 1 month, we were still kind of happy. We could make a point with that. Majority was female, reasonably, I should watch my words, older group. And in terms of overweight, it's pretty comparable to the rest of Australia. No baseline differences between groups, and the younger participants tended to drop out more during the study than older participants. So looking at physical activity advice acceptability, we developed a bunch of scores. One score looked at the content. Was credible? Did you understand it? Was it relevant? Those kind of questions. Another scale looked at how it was delivered, so video versus text versus combined, basically, and a couple of questions around the delivery method. The scale amount looks at did you receive too much information or not enough? And so higher score is better. And then the time on the website. And then, yeah, you can immediately see that those scores were all a lot better in the video group compared to the text and the combination group. The combination group is marginally better than the text group. And that's a bit odd because you think they've got all the options. They can choose to either watch the video or read the text if they don't like the video because it's all there, word for word. But you see they also spend more time on the site than people that only receive the text, but not all that much more. So it's probably a combination that people are actually watching the video and then clicking through the text already because the video probably slows you down a bit. Even though people have control over, I want to skip to the next bit or I want to move the progress bar and fast forward a bit, they had total control over how fast the video was played. In general, people just didn't do that. Whereas they did with text. They just went chuk, 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 and yeah, this is not interesting enough, next. So then looking at change in physical activity, when we look at the total group, we see very little effect. It was a bit of a disappointment. Only a small time effect for all groups when we look at physical activity and apply intention to treat to the data set. But when we only looked at those people that weren't meeting the physical activity recommendations, the effect is a lot more outspoken, and that's really for whom we developed the intervention, for people that aren't doing what they're supposed to do, I suppose. So we see convincing time effects. The interaction effect is still pretty small, and surprisingly, it's the combination group that really causes it. They have a massive increase in physical activity over time compared to the other groups, which also increase, but not as much. Yeah, it's a bit hard to explain, given the time they spend on the side and so on. So it might be, because it's a study with not optimal measures and not optimal time frames, and that it's just a fluke. That might be real, and that's obviously why we need to do more research with this. And yeah, from this we decided, video is better appreciated, but the effects on physical activity aren't convincing. So, how much time? I can go on. I've got more slides, but if it's time to stop at this, you want me to go on a bit more? Yeah. Oh, David's enjoying it. All right. I'm going to skip study 4 and go to study 5. Basically, this is the exact same study, but what we did is we split up the data set and looked at different outcomes for age groups. I'll just start with the introduction and then talk about the methods. So while we looked at different age groups and basically trying to assess whether it can be acceptable, usable, and effective for older people, is past interventions have shown to be effective for older people, but also programs for the elderly, they need to be simple and convenient. The intensity can't be too high. Often older people don't have the same means, so they want inexpensive interventions that can be taken outside formal settings. Because elderly people have a lot of barriers in terms of attending supervised programs. Transportation might be an issue, cost might be an issue. They might be affiliated with the fitness center. There might be some social embarrassment. So there's a lot of reasons why we want to reach older people using web-based interventions, because people can do it at home and it's at low cost. Computer-tailored interventions have shown good outcomes with people aged over 60 years as well. So, but it's not clear to what extent the internet is really suitable to deliver tailored help messages at older people. Internet usage might be lower in the groups. Young people are technically more adept and familiar with using the internet, and they have higher acceptability of web-based interventions. And so to be suitable for older people, your website really needs to be designed for them as well. So because very little research had happened in this area, we had a look at it and see how our intervention really worked across different age groups. Basically, the methods are identical as to the previous study I talked about. The difference is we actually controlled for intervention group and split our sample up into 3 different groups. So the younger working aged, 19 to 44 years of age, older working aged, 45 to 59 years of age, and retire aged, 60 and above. I think probably 89 was the oldest participant in our sample. And so our 3 groups have had different exposures to the internet. Our young group would have been used to the internet for most of their life. the middle group, it would have been introduced later into their life, but they're probably quite familiar with it. And the older group, it would have been really at the end, when they're already pretty old, when they first get to use it. Unique. All depends on your point of view, I suppose. So these are the same characteristics as the other study, I suppose. Average age was 52 years, so we had a good power in the older groups. That probably indicates. Within the young age group, significantly more participants were female compared to the older group. The old age group, significantly less people were employed, kind of makes sense. Middle and older group reported lower confidence in using the internet compared to the young age group, and that's an important point. No demographic differences, and as I said earlier, the young and the middle age group were more likely to drop out than the older age group. So a similar table here. When we look at our physical activity acceptability and website usability and all of that, no differences between the groups, all more or less the same. But when we look at website user stats, then we see that the older people get, the longer they spend on the site, which is kind of interesting finding. And that was significant. Was also interesting to see that the older group had the highest levels of physical activity, had higher number of sessions of physical activity they did per week, so there was a time effect across groups, but the interaction didn't seem to be significant. But when we dug a bit deeper and looked at different types of physical activity, you see the triangles are the older group, and for total physical activity, they're kind of at the same level with the middle group, but then over time they really increase a lot more than the other group. For walking, similar scenario. For motor intensity, they're already high and above the other groups, and then they increase a bit more, where the other groups decrease. And then for vigorous intensity, as expected, they're a lot lower, but then they increase a lot compared to the other groups. So I thought that were really, really interesting findings. To round up, the older age group increased physical activity more than the two other age groups, despite reporting a lower internet self-confidence at baseline. The oldest age group indicated more interest to continue to use the website than the older group. Fewer old age participants dropped out during the study compared to, I've already said that. So all this suggests that web-based interventions can be effective for people of older age. And it's kind of implicitly in contrast to earlier suggestions that this stuff just doesn't work for older people. I think people haven't examined it all that well and just assumed it doesn't work. So why do we think it worked in this case? I think as people age, the importance of their health increases because they experience more health problems. If you're 25 and someone tells you should be active or you're going to be having a hard time in 30 years' time, probably doesn't sink in all that well than when you're already 30 years older and it already starts to hurt. And it might be that older people just have more time to be active, have more time to prioritize. And that's it. So that's the time.
Perfect. Okay, thanks very much to Corneel. That was very interesting. I'll open it up to any questions now, if anyone has any. Kerry?
The video it seemed as if the advice was actually based on the hearing, because what was being filmed, like people playing tennis or walking, it didn't give you, like if you weren't listening, you didn't get the advice on what alternative to tennis or walking there was, or for how long you should do it. But like I was thinking those key words might be
what you've seen was a snippet of, I think, well, you've seen the numbers. I think on average people spend 11 minutes on the video. I've only shown you kind of snippets from that. So there's sections where there's the person talking actually is on screen. Then there's graphs. And then when there's just people being active, sometimes there was text actually also appearing on the screen saying, because one of the challenges that we couldn't do with the videos is we couldn't say people's name, for example. We couldn't say, hey, Corneel, welcome to our project, because we can't put it in our database. Similarly, we couldn't say your BMI is 23.5 because there's too many variants in that. So those kind of things actually appeared as an overlay on top of the video, like a subtitle, basically. So we could just talk in general terms. Your weight is not good, and then on screen we say, well, your BMI is 23.5 or 43.5, whatever. So yeah, but I agree to a certain degree. People could just not watch the screen and still get most of the message.
With the type of exercise, say with bone health, it found that it's like you need sort of prescription exercise, but it's quite specific what types of exercise affect your bones. And in video, like that's a concept that people don't really get, like there's stick figures with resistance exercise and that type of thing. It's a bit difficult to conceptualise from a stick figure drawing on a paper if you're not someone who does much exercise. That the video with people doing a few different activities that were consistent with the message.
Yeah. Yeah, I should point out that we, as I said at the start, we aimed this at the general population. That's primary prevention, so people that are still healthy. And so our prescription is just adhere to the recommendations, basically. Do a 30 minutes a day of moderate intensity physical activity. And without saying you should go walking or you should go running or play tennis. There's a whole range of different activities that was in the video as examples or illustrations of what people could be doing. And a lot of that was just walking around. And because that's still the most popular activity, it's cheapest. You don't need any equipment. You can do it nearly everywhere. So it's just all about reducing barriers when it comes to that. Because a lot of people are also not keen to huff and puff and sweat and do vigorous intensive physical activity. So we always try to get a good combination of what people could do and not to frighten people like, oh no, they want me to exercise. Yeah.
Tam?
Earlier in the presentation, you mentioned about the pattern, which is quite interesting, about the advice and sort of things. So in your study about the text in the video, I guess you didn't compare the text in that sort of that pattern you have with the video in the slot response.
The heat map.
Yeah.
Yeah, we didn't do heat maps. I suppose we could go back and see if that really comes out. Yeah.
Because I guess on the screen when you look at it, the text is quite sort of intense, and so I can imagine that, you know, that being more effective. I don't know how you do it, but if you fit the text into it, maybe that pattern.
Yeah. Yeah.
Hamish.
To follow up to that, how do you decide how much text to put on the web pages or in the layout of the text?
Basically, the way the website was designed is that each time, so people answer a bunch of questions at algorithms, and the algorithms then decide to show a bunch of messages. So each page had one message block, basically. And so the next message block was on a different page. And so we didn't really, because I know there's a lot of stuff out there on readability and the length of text and all that. We did not do much of that kind of stuff. It's just we kind of presented what we thought that we needed to present without we knew it had to be brief, and we couldn't go long-winded, blah, 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 endless sentences and a wall of text. We knew we couldn't do that. But we probably didn't really stick to all the rules and as to it shouldn't be more than 200 words or something, and it should be written for an age of, 12 to 16 years of age. We didn't do any of that stuff. Yeah. Yannick, you're just sitting there itching.
Thank you. Your eye tracking study, I was wondering, did people get the tailored advice there? And if so, was there a difference in people's attention and how they remembered everything based on their physical activity level?
Say that again?
So for your eye tracking study, did people get the tailored advice, or did everyone get the same advice?
Oh, no. Yeah, they get their own tailored advice.
So if they get their tailored advice, were there differences, or do you think there will be differences in your findings? So they're remembering the message depending on their physical activity level? So
I think we looked at that as well. I mean, whether they receive, for example, a positive or negative message, like A, you're doing enough, or B, you're doing not enough. If we did look at it and we did find something, would definitely be in the presentation. But I think, I'm not too sure anymore, because this is a PhD student of mine that did most of those analyses. And again, we might have been limited by power, because we only had 40 people in that sample. But it might, you might be onto something there.
Well, it could go either direction. So those who are really active might be really interested.
Yeah.
Those who are not active, not interested at all, but they also might be interested. So if you haven't done so yet, I'll look at the interaction. And also, did you know people's preferences? So you randomized them to either the video or the text. But were you aware of their preferences?
Well, that's the study I didn't present. So you saw there was 5.
Talk about that later.
There was 5, and the one I skipped was on preferences. So basically, we asked people what would they prefer to receive, either text, video, or combination, and then irrespective of what they answered, we randomized them, and then we asked them again at the end of the study, what would you prefer? And we ran the analysis with matched and unmatched. So we basically made it into 2 groups: people that got what they wanted and people that didn't get what they wanted. And it showed no difference whatsoever in outcomes. I can give you that paper.
Yeah, thanks, Corneel. I was just wondering, the messages are one thing, but people may want to change their behaviour in the first place. Any way of looking at sort of tailored environmental messages? So, for example, using Google Maps to provide advice on where to actually go for a walk? That's a big question, I guess.
Yeah, and well, I haven't done that, but I know people in the Netherlands have done that.
Yep.
I think the team in Maastricht did that, and because you add another layer of complexity to developing that kind of feedback, because you actually need to know where your people are for that to work. I don't really know the technical details on how they did it, but the outcome was that it didn't increase the effectiveness when they had an environmentally tailored module in it or not. So I think, it was a big project, and I think they were quite disappointed that it didn't add something extra, because it's a relevant point.
Yeah.
And one of the things that I will be doing with the study that we're now preparing is, because we're going to recruit people all over Australia, and one of the surveys that we're going to ask them is an environmental question, just to assess how conducive their environment is to be active or not, and see if that is moderating the effectiveness of the intervention. Whether if the intervention works better for people that live in an environment where it's easy to be active, and worse for those that have a tough environment.
And a secondary question, I guess difficulty is relying on self-report. Is there any way of using some new technologies such as Fitbit to
Yeah.
And also looking at triangulating, say, the Fitbit with sort of ongoing data, so the Fitbit feeds back to the sort of central website and that type of.
Yeah. Definitely, that's definitely on the board. Something that we're looking into. We have again a study in the Netherlands, quite an old one, was the first one to provide computer-tailored feedback based on an activity monitor. Yeah. Again, disappointingly, it didn't show any effect. But I think the whole, not just the field, but the whole world has moved on, and smartphones and tracking devices are everywhere now. There's so many different options, and something I say often in our 10,000 steps meetings, like, we need to get rid of our pedometers. They're so old school. I mean, don't get rid of them, but offer another alternative to people that want to use more fancy tracking devices than a good old pedometer. Because I really think that's where we're going with this. Yeah, for sure.
So, just thinking long term, if these programs work or the intervention works, you get people up to a level of physical activity that you need them to be at. How do you think you can then make sure that that's an ongoing thing, that they're maintaining that? Like, what is the message that you're going to give them on a website to just say, keep doing what you're doing?
Yeah, that's you're tapping back into that engagement issue. Like, will people come back to my website? Will they actually need to come back to my website? What we know from the 10,000 Steps project is that people use the site for about 45 days, which is actually quite impressive in terms of engagement. But we don't know why they stopped using it. It could be that they don't need it anymore. They don't need the pedometer anymore because they now know what 10,000 steps is, and they know whether they're doing it or not. So we don't know whether we actually need people to come back forever to our website. It might just be a startup phase and then they're on their own kind of thing. But at the same time, I think it would be beneficial for a lot of people, because a lot of people will need ongoing support, or will they slip and slide back to old habits where they're not as active. And I think, social media is probably a way to go. If we can integrate our interventions with Facebook or something, some online platform, they're going anyway. And using the tracking devices. Again, 10,000 Steps uses a tracking device as well, and it's working pretty well. So we're a long way off from cracking this nut. And I think one of the most important things that I haven't mentioned is that even if we design a website that works really well and people change their behavior and they stick to it for a long time, how do we get people to our website? Because the internet is such a competitive environment. Everybody's fighting for your attention. There's way more cooler websites out there with a lot more interesting information on it. That's the competition, and so we really need to start doing dissemination and translation trials. Here's a website that works now. How do we get it in the population and have thousands of people use it? Because that's always the argument in our grant proposals. Thousands of people will use this. It would change public health. Well, not if no one goes to your website.
We have a question.
I'm Frances Batchelor from the National Aging Research Institute. Thanks, that was a really interesting presentation. I just had a question about the third study that you talked about, where the older people who you recruited them all by email. And so they're kind of probably more like the early adopters of technology in that group. So it'd be really interesting to see what differences there might be in people who weren't already on email or weren't so proficient in technology use.
Yeah.
Can you comment on that?
Yeah,
Sense of how that would be?
Totally agree. I don't think our group was representative of older age people in Australia. There's probably some bias there. Yeah, and it would be very interesting to see. How that works for people that are completely computer illiterate. Because I think simple and basic. I mean, our website was very simple. The only thing it did do was the computer tailoring. There was very few buttons to click on there. There's nothing flashing on it. Everything had big fonts anyway. So in that sense, it probably was already pretty well made. Yeah. But I'm sure that we could go still.
Okay, well, thank you very much to Corneel, and thank you everyone for attending. And can we just have a last round of applause for Corneel?